There's this famous quote by one of the most influential scientists of all time, Isaac Newton, where he says, "If I have seen further, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants." What Newton meant by this was that he was able to make his scientific discoveries by building on previous discoveries made by scientists before him. This is how science moves forward. We publish advancements and discoveries to make them available to the next generation of young minds to build on them, bringing fresh perspectives and different life experiences to the table. But what happens when the next generation of scientists is not an accurate representation of the population? How is our collective scientific knowledge supposed to progress if we fail to bring in these fresh perspectives? On this episode, we talk about the importance of diversity and inclusivity in the world of science. Welcome to a new episode of Simply Science, the podcast that talks about the amazing scientific work that our experts at Natural Resources Canada are doing. My name is Joël Hull, and joining me is my co-host Barb Ustina. Barb, how are you?
I'm doing just fine right now, and I really like how you explained how science is built on a series of previous discoveries. In other words, science today reflects science from yesterday, last year, last century, even as far back to the dawn of time, really. Even if they didn't call it, quote, science back then. And science, like everything else in life, is always evolving. So it's important to keep up with changing times.
So true. And that's why I think it's important to talk about diversity and inclusivity, specifically in science in this case. What can you tell us about our guest today?
Well, today's guest, Cecile Siwi, is the Director General at CanMet Energy Devon, Alberta. She's a chemical engineer who oversees a research and development team exploring technology solutions for the oil and gas sector. Specifically, they're looking for ways to be competitive and environmentally responsible. It's a long way from Central Africa, where Cecile grew up. And when she's not at the office, she's involved in mentoring young people who are interested in STEM, or careers in science, technology, engineering, and math.
I'm looking forward to talk to Cecile. Should we bring her in?
Yeah, let's bring her in.
Joining us today is Cecile Siwi. Cecile, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Perfect. Can you start by telling us a little bit about what you do? Like, you're a Director General at CanMet Energy Devon, which is in Alberta, but more specifically, what does your work involve?
I run a lab. I run a research facility with about 100 people, and our focus is how to make the production of oil and gas more environmentally friendly. So that really is it in a nutshell.
Wow, that sounds pretty interesting work. It's very forward-looking, that's for sure. Now, today we're talking about inclusivity and diversity in science. And I'm wondering, why do you think it's important to have a variety of voices represented in science and research?
Well, at the very basic level, research and science are all trying to find solutions to the problems that for all of mankind, not just for one group. So it really helps to have the input of the different groups that are represented in mankind in those solutions that are being designed to address the big issues that face us. The second thing I would add to that is just the level of intelligence and brain power that might be untapped in these underrepresented communities, bringing them in to the fold so that society at large can also benefit from having those voices. We don't know where the person who might find the next change solution in curing cancer, we don't know where they might be today, and we might very easily lose out on the opportunity to hear from them or have their input if they don't find a way to make it into science and make it into a scientific discipline.
So really, it's about listening, and it's about providing space at the table for all kinds of stories. Like realizing that every person brings a different story to the table. So it's a matter of just being prepared to listen to those stories and give value to everybody's story at the table. Can you think of any examples of when a specific voice might have come to the table, or sort of an example of how a variety of voices have helped shape a particular mission or a particular science?
A couple of examples come to mind, not so much in my discipline, because my discipline and my area of research tends to be a lot more, how can I put this, group agnostic. So we make cleaner oil and gas. We try to reduce the GHG emissions to the environment that impacts everyone. But if you think about areas like the field of artificial intelligence, we know that those developing those tools, the people who designed and developed and optimized those tools, they used what they know as examples. So that's how you end up in a situation where facial recognition can really identify white men very easily, but it struggles when it comes to identifying people of color and even distinguishing between men and women. So that's just one example. A second example is if I have a bruise or a rash, I would want to look into a textbook or look on the web to say, what could this be? Chances are 90% of the pictures that I will see, the bruise or the rash will be on white skin and it presents differently. If I go to my doctor and they're looking at it, they're seeing it on brown or black skin, and it presents differently to them than what they were trained with. So having representation in those fields would have ensured putting in place solutions that would be accessible and benefit everyone in society.
That makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about you and your own experiences growing up. When did you decide that you wanted to pursue a career in science?
So I grew up in Africa. I grew up in Cameroon, which is in Central Africa or West Africa, until I was in high school. And I was brought up believing that there wasn't anything I couldn't do. So I had to go with this really strong belief in myself. Plus, I just enjoyed the sciences. I really, really enjoyed the sciences. It was challenging. But even when something was difficult, it wasn't, I have to give this up. This is not for me, because I was like, why not? You can do this. You can absolutely do this. So I can't claim to having had a call to science. It was just a space I enjoyed and I liked doing. And when I went into university, I did not have a specific career in mind, but I knew that I wanted to explore the scientific area more.
I see. There seems to be, maybe this is more of a North American thing, but there seems to be a lot that's said and written about how young girls don't really, that they often decide that they don't want to pursue a career in science at a very young age. Why do you suppose that is?
The first thing is, I don't know that it's the young girls who decide not to do science, right? So I would maybe reframe the premise of that question a little bit. I don't think young girls go up and say, I don't want to do science. And it's more that from a very early age, they have been bombarded with signals from society at large that either this is a space that's not for you, it's not cool, or it's too difficult. And by the time they get to be 12, 13, they might think, well, they don't want to do science. And they really think they're making a decision, but we don't know the extent to which their decision has been informed by signals they're receiving from society. So that's one thing. And the real shame is that research has shown that those young girls, most of them never go back to science. So you end up with a whole group of young women who have closed off a door to opportunities, to contributions that they could have made to society without fully realizing the consequences of what they could do. So I'm not expecting that, I'm not trying to suggest that every young girl can or should grow up to be a scientist. I would just like them to keep that door open long enough that they are making an informed decision at some point in time. I don't know that this is I don't think that this is a particularly North American issue. So, like when I was growing up, um, some of those signals from society existed. I mean, I could see how my teacher would have almost a peer-to-peer discussion with a male counterpart who asked the question. And me asking a question was almost like you're interrupting the flow of things. And if you ask the second question, there's just reined in impatience from the teacher. So there were things like that going on. But so it's a challenge that I think young women face or encounter all across the world, not just in North America.
Now, I do want to take you back to when you were a young child growing up and first sort of discovering for yourself that you do want to pursue a career in science or you're very interested in science. What kind of role models did you have to sort of talk to at the time?
I cannot say that I have role models to talk to. A huge influence in my life is the fact that my parents had a very strong belief in the importance of education. It really was, to get an education, there really isn't anything that you can't do or can't accomplish. So that was, there was that deciding, guiding factor in my life, so to speak. But with respect to female role models, the best one would be in my mother and maybe some of my aunts. My mother was a very strong woman who also overcame great odds to pursue a career. She was a midwife nurse and she had that career for a very, very long time. But I was in a discussion just the other day when I realized that after I left high school, so essentially as soon as I left Africa, I did not have a black tutor, a black teacher or professor through all my years of university. So I believe that has improved somewhat, but I cannot, the people that I spoke to who encouraged me were all white male.
Yeah, and that must have, like, role models have a very wide and important influence on people, especially at that age when they're just sort of entering their careers, going to university. And do you feel like you would have benefited by having role models, like young black women, young black men as role models when you're at that age?
Oh, undoubtedly. I think eventually one figures things out. But instead of reinventing the wheel, there are some things I could have figured out much sooner. There are some signals or some of those unwritten rules that I could have realized and leaned on much sooner. There are some things that I learned after I had been in the workplace for like 10, 15 years, and I'm going, oh my gosh, is this true? Is this real? So having a role model who can give you some of that constructive feedback in informal settings would have been very helpful for sure.
Have you had the chance, Cecile, to be a role model for the for the younger generation?
Yes. So one I quickly recognized when I came to North America that if I hadn't been born where I was, there was no guarantee that I would have ended up with a career in the sciences, right? I really was allowed to believe, and I truly internalized the belief that I could do anything. I could be anything if I make a choice, and I could do that. So I can see how without some of those influences, it might have been easy to just default to a path of least resistance and go that way. So I also had some very, very, I benefited from support from supervisors along the way. So this is in academic settings, like my PhD supervisor, my postdoc supervisor were all people who for no reason took my interest at heart. I benefited from some very good managers. So for all those reasons, I've always felt it incumbent to give back or pay it forward. There's a program that we have in Alberta called Operation Minerva. It's been a while since I was engaged in that program, but the idea is to get young grade 8, grade 9 students to go spend a day with a female professional in the sciences and just shadow them for a day and get to see what science is like, what a career in science is like in action, and hopefully spur that interest and really make science come to life and real for these young ladies.
So right now, you've worked in the oil and gas sectors for years now, which is a very traditional field. What attracted you to that field in the first place?
For that, I would have to go back to my undergraduate years. The program I was in, we had to do a 1 year internship, 1 year co-op program, as you might say in Canada. So, and I happened to do mine at a research center, so British Petroleum BP Research in the UK, and I really enjoyed what I did there, the things I was working on, the challenges of it. Just I was like being a science detective. It was very interesting, and I decided I wanted to make a career in that space, and that's when I decided what I would do for my PhD, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Were there any particular challenges for you at that stage in terms of being a young Black woman starting in a scientific field like that?
So here's what I would say to that. I was studying in England. I was doing chemical engineering. It's in the late 90s. So that was an area that did not have a lot of women. So you quickly become either the only female or the only Black person or the only Black woman around. And after a while, you start noticing, right? You just get on with it. This is a space I enjoy. I have colleagues I like working with. I am working on something that's interesting, and you just get on with it. So I cannot really speak to any overt impediments, something that really made me feel like I wasn't welcome, and that wasn't the space that I was going to be. Now, I'm sure many other people have had different experiences. I was always in academic settings. I was in research institutions, even when I worked in the private sector, which I guess is different than being in the field. So women who have actually worked in the field would definitely have different experiences. And as I said earlier, I really benefited from leaders around me who took an interest in my career and would just make sure that I was getting advice and they just give me the benefit of their time and their insights.
Now we hear about academic institutions, especially universities, becoming more diverse. You can just look at any university in Canada, their student body, and it's very diverse. With the expectation that will somehow then translate into further on into other institutions, other workplaces. Have you seen things change? Are you seeing things change in terms of that diversity?
I'm sure things have changed from when I was a student at those universities. As I said earlier, I never had a Black person as a professor or an instructor, and I can probably count the number of women I had. I'm just trying to think here. In fact, I think the first female instructor I had wasn't even an instructor, it was my postdoctoral fellowship supervisor. So things have changed. Just students who are in academic settings today would likely have one or two Black professors or female professors, but it still would be one or two. So I don't think the numbers are anywhere near where they need to be when compared to the wider population. And the concern then is what message is that sending to the students if they're not seeing themselves represented in the people who are teaching them, and are they getting messages that that's not a space that they can aspire to. Those are not careers that they can aspire to. So we all have a long way to go it's a good thing that the student body, the diversity in the student body has increased. It's definitely come a long way. We have to make sure that translates into that moves further downstream into academic institutions, into research scientific institutions, as well as into faculty.
So you mentioned earlier the importance of a positive work environment. What are we doing at Natural Resources Canada to try to encourage greater diversity and inclusivity?
So this past summer, the deputy ministers actually stood up a working group on diversity and inclusion to really put a strategic framework around all the things that may have already been going on in the department on an ad hoc basis. So that work has progressed to the point where a strategic proposal has been put forward now for an NRCan strategy for diversity and inclusion. I think there was also recently the creation of a Black Employees Association network that specific to NRCan, but that's also developing linkages into the different employment equity groups and other diversity groups in different parts of the public service.
So we can have programs like this, but it's a matter of having, we can invite people and have people at the table, but it's a matter of having their voices heard as well, which is sort of another aspect of diversity. How can we make sure that everybody's voice is heard?
So that is very true. One of the best analogies I ever heard about this D&I space is that the speaker said, diversity is being invited to the dance, right? So that's diversity. Inclusion is when someone actually asks you to dance. And I thought that is so true. And that speaks to, you can have people in the room, but are they being heard? So it then falls on the leaders. You have the official leaders and the unofficial leaders, the thought leaders who are, they might not have the position as a manager or supervisor, but people look to them. It then falls to those people in the room to create the space to make sure that all the voices are being heard. That's the point of having a wide range of perspectives in the room. You want that input into decisions that are being made, solutions that are being found. So if I go back to that analogy of being invited to the dance, the leaders, the leaders, the managers, supervisors, and thought leaders, they're like the host of the party. You throw a party, you invite people, and people show up, but you want everyone to have a good time. I know this is really simplistic, but you want everyone to have a good time. So if you notice someone doesn't have any drink in their hand, you offer them a drink, and you pass the plate of canapes around. And if someone is not dancing, you go and invite them to dance. So, but we do have to this is not something that comes naturally to everyone. And as with most things, some training might be required, but we have to learn how to create the space for the people at the table, for the people in the room, to make sure that their perspectives and their inputs are captured.
I really like that analogy. So Cecile, what would you encourage young people listening right now who are interested in a career in science? What do you encourage them to do or say to make sure that their voices are heard?
Science is such an interesting space, and I know I have a biased view. It's so interesting. Science is all around us, and there's so many different things that young people can do. So the first thing I would say is ask questions. And if you feel like you're not getting a response or you don't understand the response, just keep asking the question, ask and ask again, and make sure that you are heard. Talk to people around you. Ask people what they do, people in your circle. Ask to be introduced to people to find out what they do. Why they chose their career. You find that people are so interested in the things that they've done, in the things that they've chosen to do, the things that they're planning to do. And if you ever start finding yourself thinking, "Oh, this is not for me," just stop and ask yourself: Is it really you saying that, or is it just messages that you've been receiving and internalizing without realizing? So I just want to repeat again that not every young person can grow up, and not every young girl can grow up to become a scientist. But I do so want them to be making an informed decision. And if you say it is not for me, you can say yes, it is not for me, and I know this because I have come to this point. I did not close the door when I was in grade 6 or grade 8. I remained open to the possibilities until I found something that I liked more.
Mm-hmm. And even if they think they're not interested in science when they're in grade 5, like in grade 10, they might change their mind, or when they're graduating from university, they might change their mind. So it's like, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself too much, early on in your life like that. And I just want to get back to, sort of the work that you do, and the sector that you're working in now is clean energy, which is like a relatively new field. It's evolving. It's really super exciting. And I'm wondering if, the newness of everything to do with clean energy, does that, do fields like that offer like more opportunity for diversity and inclusion? Like it's brand new, like there are no sort of traditions set up yet.
I don't know. I think I'd be hesitant to say it offers a brand new opportunities. It definitely offers exciting opportunities, but the challenge with recruitment into these fields and retention that we've experienced in other fields will still remain. This is the question I ask everyone, and we all have to ask ourselves these questions. After the events of last summer and after, the Black Lives Matter protests that we saw, all institutions and companies and organizations, they really have good intentions and they mean well. But the thing is, what are we going to do differently? If we want different outcomes, we have to do something differently. The people at the front lines, the gatekeepers, have got to really absorb those good intentions and translate them into doing something differently. So this is true of the clean tech space. It's an exciting space. There are lots of innovative challenges that can apply here, but we have got to think differently to attract young people into these fields. The same, young people, young women, young Black women into this space. The same as we need to do in all areas.
So if people would like to know more about just diversity and inclusion in the world of science, are there any resources online available?
Well, a quick Google search would really throw up so much that people can look at. You have some exciting young female scientists who have they do TikTok, they're on Instagram, they're on Twitter, and it's really easy to find these people and follow them. There are some resources, there are organizations that make resources available. They put on talks and things like that. One thing that I think that might sometimes get overlooked in this space is, on the one hand, we are telling and we are saying, which is true, these young women, that it's so hard to get into this space, there's underrepresentation. We have to make as much of an effort to tell them, why should they get into this space? What's in it for them? If it's so hard and they're going to not see themselves represented around them, why should they be getting into this space? So we also have to make sure that we give young women the messages of the contributions that they can make, the exciting careers that they can make, so that they can see what's in it for them to pursue careers in this space and not just for them to do it for the benefit of society.
Thank you so much, Cecile, for taking the time to come and chat with us today. The information you provided us and the insight is really important, and we really appreciate you taking the time to come and chat with us.
Great. It was my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
It was great to talk to Cecile and see things from her point of view.
For sure. She has such an interesting background, and she's a real trailblazer when you think about it. I love the analogy she came up with when she compared it to a dance card. It's great to be invited to a dance, but real inclusivity happens when you're invited to the dance floor. And she said it a whole lot better than I just did. But so, yes, we need to talk about diversity, inclusivity, and what it means. And could this be a time for profound and meaningful change? Let's keep the conversation going.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's really important to get that, to keep that conversation going. You're absolutely right. So for you, our audience members, we have some links in the episode description that might be of interest to you. There's a link to an article called 17 Ways to Get Excited About STEM, where we ask NRCan scientists about what or who inspires them. It's basically a list of cool ways to get excited about STEM careers. We also have links to some of the work being done at CanMet Energy in Devon, where Cecile works. So if you like the episode, feel free to share it with your friends. And if you share over Twitter, make sure to tag us at NRCanScience, or you can tweet at us directly. I'm at Joel Science.
And I'm at Simply Science B, that's the letter B. I might remind everyone that Simply Science also has a website and a YouTube channel, which you should check out. We have in-depth articles of interest and videos that showcase the fascinating scientific work that we do at Natural Resources Canada. And you can find those links in the episode description as well. Social media channels, too.
Thank you, Barb. And thank you so much, everyone, for listening. We'll see you in the next episode.
See you next time.
If you like this video, let us know with a thumbs up. Click on the logo below to subscribe to the Simply Science channel and click the bell icon to be notified when we upload new videos.